Hi, I'm Kim Kocak, and I'm the owner of Corazon Holistic Health on Main Street in downtown Columbia.
And I'm Melanie Peebles. I work here as well as one of the clinicians.
So this is our monthly, we get together and talk about lots of different things. So this month is Neurodiversity Awareness Month, and I know it's probably listed as Autism Awareness Month.
It is listed as autism.
But I'm going to change that to Neurodiversity Awareness Month because there's so many things under that umbrella. Right?
Yeah, because that was going to be one of my questions, which is how do you define autism spectrum disorder? But then my follow-up question to that is, what does it mean to be neurodiverse?
Right. So it's a very good question. And what I would say is this, is that everything that falls under the umbrella is a neuroprocessing difference, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I hate the word disorder because we're not trying to fix this. There's nothing to fix.
No.
This is an understanding. And once we can understand how your brain processes versus how my brain processes, correct, right, it looks very different. And some of the things that fall under that are like dyslexia, dyscalculia, Tourette's, ADHD, autism spectrum disorder, right? So autism spectrum disorder predominantly, and everybody's presentation is a little bit different.
Yeah.
But the predominance of it is a social component, right? So it's that social emotional piece that often feels disconnected. They're not reading cues well. Sometimes there is oral operation issues with language, but more often than not, it's actually the right brain side of conceptual language that's impacted. Right?
So like more abstract stuff?
More abstract stuff.
Okay.
Right. And then we're also talking about sensory stuff, right? Now that's not to say that nobody else has sensory stuff, because they do, right?
Sure.
But it's this combination of how it shows up. And I hear a lot of this language today where, well, isn't everybody a little bit on the spectrum? Well,
oh my gosh, that annoys me so much.
It does, because it's very minimizing, because just like with anything, I have a lot of people, as I'm sure you do, that come and say, I think I have borderline. Because when you look at the criteria, you're like, I do that, I do that, I do that, I do that.
Like, do you do that all the time and have lost a job because of it? Okay, then
right.
You don't have borderline personality disorder, friend. Also,
That's
you did not come in my office and say that and have borderline personality
That's
disorder.
right.
That's not real.
That's right.
That's not real.
And that's the same thing with neurodiversity, right?
Yes.
So what is the impact to your life?
I always use the instance of, because people say that, like with depression, I think I have some depression. What does that mean? Are you sad or are you depressed? Because those are two different things. Yeah. Or anxious, like, are you worried about something because situationally something is happening? Yeah. Or does literal life feel like a dreadful place to be?
Like all color is gone and you can't get out of bed.
Right. Like those are very different. It's like being sad and being depressed are different things. Yeah. Having some, like maybe being socially awkward or having some texture issues is different than having autism.
That's right. That's right. And it is really underdiagnosed in women and people of color.
Right? Why is that?
Well, thanks for asking. So often it is because culturally, right, if a kid who is having some of these regulation issues,
and you're talking about like nervous system regulation.
I'm talking about nervous system regulation. Okay. That's exactly right. So they're having some nervous system regulation issues, and maybe some pathological demand avoidance, some PDA. If you're a young, especially male of color, you're going to get oppositional defiance disorder.
Oh, that feels yucky. I don't like that.
It sure does, right? You're a problem. You're being defiant. You're choosing not to do this rather than you're dysregulated and not going well.
I really don't like the word defiant when talking about children. It hurts my heart a little bit.
I don't either.
Because I just don't know that that's accurate.
I don't believe it is. I mean, I'm not saying there's not, but that is the exception and not the rule.
Yes. I don't think that you can't be defiant, but like, I think the vast majority of children do not like wake up in the morning and are like, I'm just going to be defiant and say no to everything.
Yeah. I'm just not doing it because she wants me to.
Right. Yeah, like also what 8-year-old has that concept of like, that's an abstract thought. That's not real.
That's an abstract thought. That's exactly right. So I see a lot of that. And then with women, and I had someone tell me, I do a women's neurodivergent group once a month. And I had someone tell me the other day that they went to get tested and were told they were too intelligent.
What is
I don't even know what that means.
So I'm too happy to have anxiety?
Yes.
What does that mean?
Correct. Right. I mean, that's right. That is incorrect.
And absurd.
It is irresponsible. And it is very very hurtful and harmful to people to be minimized in that way. But girls are often seen as being bossy, hysterical, emotional. So we don't see the dysregulation. And if they're smart, we really overlook it, right? Oh, she's smart. So, she's just bossy. She's just whatever. No, she's probably having some rigid thinking, and she doesn't understand the social context of what's happening. And therefore she's dysregulated and not going to be able to meet her needs. And in those situations, often what we see is isolation, feeling outside of, which then what does it bring? Anxiety, depression, now mental health issues enter the picture, right? But in and of itself, neurodiversity is not a mental health issue. It is the lack of understanding and awareness that they engage with every single day, the masking, the burnout, all of those things that start to happen that then create depression, anxiety, social isolation, suicidal ideations. That's where we start to see those things come in.
Yeah. So it's a lack of understanding and a different way of processing social information.
That's right. Okay. And there is a variant in the brain where the processing happens slower. So they take a longer time to process.
I call my folks, like I say, you may be one of those people who's a more internal processor.
Yeah.
And then next session when you come in, you may have a different insight.
That's right.
To help normalize that, like what that looks like. Because they'll look at me and they're like, I don't feel like this is working because I don't process quickly enough. Well, I'm not asking you to.
Right. But we live in a world of immediate gratification.
Oh, for sure.
So people say, hey, this, and then they want this immediate response. And
there are very few instances where an immediate response is actually required.
That's right. That's right. And because we live in this technology-driven society world today, we expect we're going to get an immediate answer.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So it does impact how we talk to each other. Because when you think about communities in the past, we had more tolerance for people just being who they were.
Yeah, in some ways, sure.
Yeah. And in the sense of like, so-and-so down the street, well, he's just turned funny, right? It's not that he's, you're like, okay, right? But he's still part of the community. We still consider him. We still, growing up in a small community where I come from, those were things that I saw, right? We didn't just discard or cancel people because they didn't process the same way we did, right? We still might have labeled them as being weird, right? Or something like that, odd, right? But we didn't dismiss them completely.
Yeah.
And so today, the problem is, I think a lot of people who are a level 1 supports need. So there's 3 levels of support needs within autism. So level 1 does need supports. Level 2 needs more intense supports. And level 3 is probably needs full-time supports. Right?
I think that is probably what most people think of as autism, is that level 3 support. At least that's been my experience.
I agree.
Because so many folks are like, well, I can do all of these specific kinds of like activities of daily living and like live life. So how can my kid have autism when they do this, this, and this, and they go to school every day? And I'm like, yeah, but you're telling me also that your kid doesn't have any friends and that they don't show interest in that and that they're still parallel playing and your kid's 12.
Right.
Like those are different things. Like
those are different things.
That shows some different processing.
That's right. And the concern is often that even when people are getting through, because in females in general are better at mimicking. So lots of times they're mimicking what they're seeing. It's not really how they feel. It's not really what they're processing. They've just learned what the expectation is and they're mimicking that. But for them, it takes a tremendous amount of mental and emotional wherewithal to be able to do that. So then we see burnout, right? Then we see what we call autism catatonia, where they actually, it goes into a dorsal shutdown.
Yeah.
And they literally, their digestion stops. They can't access language. And then this is often when we see, well, they're being defiant. They won't answer me, right? And the truth is they no longer have access to that piece of the brain. And this is part of that nervous system fight or flight.
Yeah.
And the dorsal system is where, so we go from, the first thing with fight is we're going to fight the enemy, right? Second is we're going to flee from the enemy. And third is we're going to play dead.
Yep.
Right. And it's like when you have too many blow dryers plugged in and you have to go flip the breaker because the fuse blew, because it's just too much information. There's also a component of the middle ear that we are finding in research that is heavily impacting how the brain is filtering and processing information.
Mm-hmm.
And that middle ear for the average person, like right now, I can hear the air. I can hear cars outside. I can't really hear that tree blowing, but I can imagine that it is. I can hear lots of things in here, but my brain tunes that out, and I'm focused on you, right? I'm listening to you, and that noise isn't bothering me. Oftentimes for people who are neurodiverse, they cannot filter that out. So all that information is constantly going into their nervous system. On top of that, they may be very, very sensitive to smell and have a very high olfactory. And as we know, that goes directly to the brain without a filter at all.
Yep.
Right?
That's the only part of the brain that does that, or the only one of your 5 senses that goes straight into like that system of safety.
Right. So then we also have sights, very distracted, lots of sights, bright lights. It's overwhelming to the nervous system. Textures, taste. But there's 2 others that we don't talk about, and that is pain, number 1. So they may be hypo or hyper sensitive to pain, and it may be all in the same person, but in different parts of the body.
Yeah.
And then there is the pain receptors. So we have this interoception, which is your body is always measuring the pressure that is on all of your organs and kind of taking account for what's happening at all times.
Yeah,
right?
your protoself does that, what I talk about in DBR.
That's right. And so when that's happening, that is a sensory input to the brain. So we think about the 5 senses, but there's internal systems that are at work too, that are always sending information to the brain. So if your brain process is slower, you're now overwhelmed. So now I'm so busy trying to regulate, I can't hear what you're saying to me. And this may look like I'm tuning you out, but really it's my brain saying that can't happen right now because I have all of this happening, right? So, and people tend to be very direct and straightforward. There's not a lot of fluff. The small talk doesn't make any sense. It's chatter. It's too much information, right? And they're trying to understand what's happening and they want to cut to the chase. People will say, well, they don't have empathy. Well, that's not true. They have lots of feels.
Yeah, they have all the feels. What are we talking about?
Yes, but they have something typically called alexithymia, which is an inability to articulate what they are experiencing or even to identify it in a lot of cases. Like, I'm feeling something, but they don't have that connection to their mind-body piece in a way that they even understand what's happening, and then it just creates a shutdown.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's a very long answer. And it is complicated, and yet it isn't. It's really about information into the nervous system that it processes slower, and then how does that show up in behavior? Right?
And the behavior doesn't match what we think it should match as a culture.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Yeah, that's the piece where somebody says something and you're like,
yeah,
why would we say that here?
Right.
Or they don't get a joke.
Don't get a joke, or sarcasm.
Sarcasm is a big one. Yeah, I think that's a really big one because we have such a sarcastic society, and that doesn't feel good for small children anyway because they don't understand that. But then if you also add autism into that, that's going to make that even worse.
That's right.
That's interesting.
Yeah, and a lot of times, the language that I hear a lot is, I mean, I had friends, but I wasn't really their friend. Like I wouldn't have been the friend they chose. I always feel outside of, or I feel not a part of, or sometimes I feel in, and then I don't know, I say or do something, I don't know what I did, and then I'm out again, and I don't know how to manage that. So then I start to withdraw and become smaller, right?
I've also gotten the feedback from a couple of folks that I've worked with talking about how I think I had a lot of friends like growing up, but then I start asking them like what those looked like, and what I find is it's very hierarchical. And they were always the leader, or they were always the person that was in charge. They had a very specific job that rarely deviated from this very specific piece. And when I asked more questions about what those people were like outside of that specific setting, they were like, what do you mean?
Right.
Which I thought that was a really interesting way because they found a way to find connection, but it didn't necessarily like globalize into other places.
That's right.
Which I always thought was really fascinating. There's this, I forget what book it is. I think it's called it's called ADHD 2.0. And one of the things that it said about ADHD specifically is that it's like having a brain that has a Ferrari engine, but you have bicycle brakes.
Yeah.
I would flip that, right? Isn't that good?
I love that.
But you would flip that for autism. It's like you have bicycle pumping action, but you have Ferrari brakes.
That's right.
Right. So everything just like,
that's a great analogy. That's right.
That's super interesting. That's a really good way in my own brain to kind of conceptualize
it
that.
Is. And language is so highly affected, but everyone tends to default to thinking about it being operational versus conceptual.
Yes.
Right? And so conceptual language, they will have trouble finding a word, and that word doesn't feel right. And also that's what the word means. I'm like, that's not what it means to me, right? It's this feeling, right? And I'm like, okay, so what do you think the word feels like, right? And they're like, well, I think it's this, or, then they'll get frustrated and they stop communicating, right? Texting is very difficult. Staying on tasks for like, they want to have friendships, but they're like, but it's exhausting because they expect me to text right back, or they expect me to do this, and I don't know if I can do that.
All of those things are hard.
Yeah, they're hard. So then they're like, do I really find friendships? And what does that look like in relationships? And in marriages, we see this a lot, where maybe we have one neurotypical person and one person who's not neurotypical. And we have these conflicts, and they'll say, well, they don't show up in the way that I want them to, that I don't feel connected. They don't say the right words to me, but they do all of these other things that show me they love me, but I feel disconnected.
Yeah,
right?
I hear that a lot.
Yeah, so we work through a lot of that.
Or they'll say a very specific word that I think I know what it means, and then realize like 4 sessions later that like, wow, okay, my thought about what that word meant, because I thought gentle meant gentle, and now I don't know what that, and also the partner doesn't know what that means. Right. I think that's such an interesting way too. And that goes back to that language piece of,
yes,
it's like having a different language.
It is
almost.
And they tend to be very literal. And I don't think people realize how much we don't talk literally. Right.
Yeah. We do have a lot of abstract, like similes and metaphors that we kind of use. It makes me think of this old cartoon. I don't know if you know what this is. It was a Looney Tunes cartoon, and it literally went through a couple of texts, and it did that. And he's like, he was carrying on, and it showed the word on, like on his back. And he was like this. He was sweating bullets as it was going. And then the bullets were like falling like out of his face.
Yeah.
It was super. That's what that makes me think of is
that's a good one.
It needs to be exacting kind of language. It's also why when you ask like a kiddo that's neurodivergent to like do something, don't be given like 17 different like instructions, because that's legitimately not going to work. Also, that's not going to work for most kids, to be clear, but really not going to work for like a neurodivergent kiddo. But also, they're going to do the exact thing that you've asked, and they're not going to deviate from that, and they're not going to see those other pieces.
That's right.
Right. So if I ask my kid at home, like, hey, make sure you feed the animals, right? Okay, well, depending on what that means to them, like, does that mean I'm just going to feed the inside cat and the dog? Or does that mean I am also going to go take care of the outside cats and the farm animals and the blah, 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 right? And if I don't give that very exacting information, if I don't say feed the inside cat and the outside cats, something might get missed. And and it's not my kid like being defiant or lazy or that's not what that is.
Lazy.
Yeah, I don't like that word either. It's another word I'd like to axe from our vocabulary.
And and in my group, I have a mix of very young and people who are older, and they're like, I can tolerate a conversation first of all, let me say that the majority of the people that we work with here are level 1, maybe level 2. Yeah, and they have jobs, they're intelligent, they have kids. And often we will see this show up when they have children. I read this article over the weekend where a neurotypical woman was saying about her neurodiverse husband that she's like, when we first got together, exactly what I loved about him is what's probably going to end this marriage, because now we have a child and I don't have the capacity to scaffold for him. Meaning, before I could create a foundation that worked for him, and I could be, okay, I'll catch you over here, or I'll have this here, or I'll have the stepping stool for you. Now that requires more energy from her than she has, and she can't do that.
Yeah, that's so sad.
It is. And so, but this is where I often work with people to help them find that commonality and understand that people aren't doing it to irritate them, right? And what does that mean, and where can we meet? Because it doesn't mean people with neurodiversity can't grow.
No, it does not.
They can learn distress tolerance. They can. And what I have found is that with my clients, and I'm doing that series on our YouTube channel where I'm doing interviews with our actual clients, right? And what they're going to say is, me understanding me then set me up for success because I set boundaries, I have self-care, I know what skills to use when, and because their fight or flight isn't getting triggered in the same way, they're able to stay more present and in their body.
Okay, so organic plug, what's our YouTube channel?
Our YouTube channel.
It's just our business name.
It's Corazon Holistic Health.
Put her on the spot, guys.
Yeah, you did. I don't know. Sophia handles all of that.
She does.
So yes, we should be plugging that though, right? So yeah, so it is Corazon Holistic Health on YouTube.
Yeah, like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. Because there is, and the reason why we did that is kind of like the whole idea of Alcoholics Anonymous, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to understand something differently from someone who's had that lived experience
Correct.
with me than I am just me conceptualizing it. And even though I work with it every day and I can recognize it and see it, I might not really understand some of the nuances of what that looks like in an everyday situation.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Is that diagnosis like really important? Is it necessary?
That's a great question. And the answer is, it depends.
Of course.
So if you're younger, I think it is very necessary. I think it changes services that you're going to get. I think it changes supports that you're going to get. And I think it changes understanding within your family and social structures to make sure that your needs are being met and not being seen as being defined.
Yeah.
When we see a lot of, there's very particular times where we see escalation of symptomology, and it tends to be like going from that parallel play into a more complex social environment. So
like a reciprocal
to sixth grade.
relationship.
That's right. So 4th to 6th grade, we see that. And then we see it again coming out of high school, going into college or going into the workforce. And then we see it again if it's after college, going into the workforce. And then we see it at going into relationships and then having children. There are very specific places where life has changed. The expectation has changed significantly. And what the DSM says is when the social demand outweighs the capacity, right? So we just want to increase capacity so that the social demands don't feel so high.
Right.
Because if your capacity is here and the social demand keeps going up and up and up, and you're not gaining skills to get there. So does a diagnosis matter? Yes. For accommodations, for support, for those types of things. Does a diagnosis matter as an adult? And I'm going to say that depends on the adult.
I think it can.
Yeah. I think for some it does, right? They need that. They need to see that black and white, definitive, yes, this is what it is.
This explains what's going on for me. This helps make sense of my world.
That's right. And because they've been told so many things by that time that's
Oh
wrong with them,
yes.
they're like, well, how is this different than something else? And what I'll say is this is the framework. It matters what framework we put the symptomology in.
Oh, agreed. Because so many of the things that like you were talking about that are for autism are also for PTSD.
That's right.
Because if you're talking about overstimulation of like sensory inputs, that's absolutely true for somebody who has PTSD.
Absolutely.
Right? Like they're not going to want to hear a bunch of crosstalk, the TV and the radio on at the same time. Like that's just going to make their nervous system very sad.
Right.
But that also could be true for somebody with ADHD.
That's right. Or Tourette's.
Yes. Or an anxiety disorder, or I don't know. Like I also don't like all of that.
Right.
That sounds terrible.
Right. And I have trauma. So my nervous system certainly reacts very similarly.
Yeah.
Right. And there are times where I am just overwhelmed, but I know now how to manage my nervous system to stay connected to my body, to know when I shouldn't be making a decision, when I need to do self-care. Like I know those things today.
Yeah,
it is really not any different when we're talking about neurodiversity, right? What do I need in this moment? But having that, being able to stay embodied, be able to do that and recognize what's happening, because a lot of times that alexithymia piece and that interoception piece, like some people who have ASD might not have a cue for when they're hungry, for when they're full, for when they have to go to the bathroom, for certain pain cues. There's a disconnect between the messaging, right? And this is why also we know that gut health issues are directly correlated to neurodiversity.
Yeah, we see that so much here.
Because we're going in and out of that fight or flight all the time. And our nervous system is shutting down because it's in fight or flight. So it's shutting down our gut health.
If you're running from a hungry tiger, like digesting the bagel you just ate is pretty
low on my, that's right. That's not where my energy's
Not
going.
helpful.
So if
Run.
so if I'm doing that in a social situation all the time and my system sees that, like the eye contact, right?
Yeah.
So if I'm having to make eye contact, because I know everybody expects that of me,
Mhm.
but it takes a tremendous amount of energy and it makes me very anxious, my
Mhm.
system is now shutting down.
Yeah.
So we see ulcerative colitis, we see IBS, we see a million things, right? So
many
chronic
ulcers,
constipation,
like,
chronic diarrhea, I mean, inflammation.
Yeah.
We see all of this gut health stuff because our nervous system is going up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down.
Yeah, it doesn't recover. It doesn't stay at like a recover place.
That's right. It doesn't recover.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a diagnosis is important, but even if the diagnosis is not some kind of formal documentation, if it's being with a therapist who recognizes and says, here's where I see, and I can diagnose that without having to do all that, let's talk about neurodiversity. Let's treat the symptomology. Let's understand how you're processing.
Yeah.
Some people don't need a formal diagnosis to be able to do that. Some people feel more comfortable with it, but it just depends on the individual.
Yeah. So it can give answers, but sometimes it isn't completely necessary.
Correct.
Yeah. When I like that autonomy, I like giving that autonomy to the client.
Yeah.
As much as possible, because that's just going to help them a lot more.
It does.
How do we treat it then once we think that there's neurodiversity, once we see that ASD is actually on the table? Like, what are we doing to treat it? I know what some people are doing like out there.
Right.
I'm much more interested in how we do it.
Yeah. So, you know, there's been a standard that's appropriate for some children, but actually not most children. Really, when we're talking about safety issues is when ABA is most appropriate. It is not appropriate for adults. So the answer is there really hasn't been a way to treat it. There's not been a standard way that is recommended by anybody to treat it. We really stopped treating it once people became adults. We just didn't treat it anymore.
Well, that's helpful.
I know. So what we have done through research of Dr. Stephen Porges on polyvagal theory and how that impacts trauma and ASD is we here at Corazon use a combination. So we use ACT, which is acceptance commitment therapy. We use polyvagal theory, which is a nervous system regulation system. And we do some things with SSP, which is safe and sound protocol, RRP, which is rest and restore protocol. We do somatic therapy. So in nutrition, our combination is to treat the whole person and to understand all that they're experiencing. Yeah. So it's got to be regulation of the nervous system. It's got to be understanding the psychoeducation, understanding what's actually happening and what's not happening. That narrative that you've built about I'm the problem, I'm the weirdo, I'm this, I'm that. We have to address that. But so we're predominantly using ACT, ACT, and we're using polyvagal theory and then add-ons such as EMDR, even DBR. We're using...
Well, DBR is used because like oftentimes kids who have autism really, really early, they have attachment wounding because that connection very, very early in age does not happen for a variety of reasons for, you know, the things that like we're talking about. Like if you think of having a more difficult first couple of years of life, right? Like a fussy baby, a baby that maybe doesn't latch as easily, that maybe because they don't know what their hunger cues are and they don't know all of those other things. So when they are hungry, it's such immediate urgency that they can't calm down to like latch and all of these other things. Like later on, we may see that that's autism. It may or may not be, but like certainly could be.
But we know it still creates attachment stuff one way or the other.
Right. So there's something going on there. So DBR would help with that piece of it because it helps you rewire that part of like the hindbrain. That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, that's right. So we take a whole body approach here, right? We do nutrition, we do somatic therapies like yoga. You have to be able to move through this. We also rewire through the SSP and the RRP. We do some psychoeducation so that you understand what's happening and what these sensations mean.
Which SSP specifically is designed to deal with the middle ear.
That's right.
Piece of it.
That's right.
Yeah.
And SSP will help you have more social capacity, more access to language. But then a lot of times what we see is people with neurodiversity have a difficult time getting started in the day, right?
Yeah.
But then they have a really difficult time shutting down in the evening,
Mm-hmm.
right? My favorite thing that is often associated with neurodiversity is synesthesia. I love this. Right? Everything is connected in a little different way.
So tell everybody what synesthesia is.
Yeah. So if you have, maybe you hear music and then you see the musical notes in color, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or you have a word that tastes a certain way, or you have just these visual, like your senses interconnect in a way that feels so much richer to me.
Yeah, right.
And so,
I also would like to see music. That sounds amazing.
So several of my clients have where when I think of a calendar, I think of this square box that hangs on the thing and it has boxes for each day, right?
The grid. Yeah.
It's very boring. So my clients who have synesthesia will often see a calendar that is either in a wave or it's in a circle, and the circle has color. And each part of this has a different amount. So August might take up this much space, and July might take up this much space, and September may take up this much space, and it's going to be somewhere on their curve. And you could look that up online. I mean, this is a pretty common. I love this.
I wish I looked at that would be a far more interesting way to see a calendar.
I know.
This nonsense
it just
that
feels more fun to me.
Like this. Boring.
Right.
What is that? Where's my pie chart?
It feels more fun to me. I know. Because their concepts of time are often a little different too. Right.
Oh, so, that is absolutely the truth. Yeah.
So and so for them, some months feel longer than others for different reasons. And so when they see it in
like
this
the month of December for so many of us
is
the longest. It's 12 months of itself.
That's right. Because it's so dark. That's right. So, I mean, there's lots of ways in which this shows up that is fun. So often we'll hear that you have superpowers, because something that my neurodivergent people are so good at. They'll meet someone and they may not know exactly why in that moment that they're like, something's off. That person isn't being concise in what they're saying, right? And that doesn't ring true. What you're saying and doing don't align for me. And they have a really good sense of people.
Well, that's that neuroception, right?
It is
that ability to detect, does your face match what's going on in your body?
That's right.
Right. And we all have that to a certain degree,
we do.
For sure. But our neurodiverse people, absolutely. Because anytime I'm sitting in session and if I try and sugarcoat something, which I don't do very often, but if I do it, the client's going to sit back and look at me and be like, what you not saying?
Right. What's happening?
You're right. I should just say what I mean.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So it's really interesting. And there are things but they don't trust themselves because they've been outside of so much, right?
Yeah.
And they worry that they're missing a cue. They worry that they're missing something. And so then they don't trust themselves. So we have to build that trust back.
Well, and sometimes, especially in children, that's coded as being rude.
Yes.
Right? Because adults don't understand that kids can be linear and logical and precise as well without being rude. It's they're not questioning you.
They're being disrespectful. They're being rude. Girls are being bitches or they're being bossy, right?
That disrespectful thing is really obnoxious to me because it's no, that might not be what's going on.
And they don't want to be. So then they're like, well, what did I do? Right? It's confusing. Yeah. This is where the burnout happens because they're trying to analyze. They practice a conversation 500 times before they're having it.
Yeah.
Even a minute conversation that doesn't have a lot of weight.
Yeah, what are we having for dinner tonight?
Yes.
Oh my God.
But how am I going to say this? Then I'm going to get upset because they've had so many situations where they didn't understand how they presented in a way that upset others that they're trying to understand that.
Right? We want to always control that, and that's not the job of the neurodiverse person. We all should be contributing to that.
That's right. So, and we should ask more questions. So if someone says something that sounds rude to us or feels a little cutting, ask yourself why you're so affected by that.
I do that with my husband. My husband's really funny because when we first started off in our marriage, he would say something, and I also have a trauma history. So, things hit with me in a different way. And I'd close my eyes and I'd say, okay, Jamie, I understand that you love me and I'm always going to come from that space. But when you said this is what I heard. And he would be like, oh, no. That's not what I wanted you to hear. We've gotten so good at it now where I'll just kind of I have this little cock of my head where he's like, hang on, I heard what I said. Give me a minute. And I know what you heard. I heard what I said and I know what you heard. Give me a minute. And then he reframes it. And I'm like, okay. But it's that pause.
Yeah.
And it's his capacity to give me the pause. And it's my capacity to ask for it.
That's right.
Right. That's how that comes together.
That's right. Rather than just being reactionary.
Yeah, because what I wanted to say was, you jerk, what's wrong with you? Don't say that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think that's the piece that I think people need to understand.
Yeah.
It says there's learning that can happen.
Yeah.
Everyone can gain their skills, but it's not just the neurodiverse person's responsibility to show up in a neurotypical world and make all the accommodations. Neurotypical people, be nice. Ask more questions and don't assume. That's right.
Be curious.
Yeah. And rude isn't always just because you didn't hear it the way you wanted to. I mean, is it wrong? Sometimes it's just not as fluffy as we'd like it, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't make it wrong. It's just direct. And I get that all the time.
Oh, so do I, for sure, that I'm too direct.
But it's also why my neurodiverse people really like me, because they don't have to read between the lines, because I'm very direct.
Yeah. Because I don't have to wonder what I'm thinking and feeling and whether or not that's congruent.
That's right. And a lot of this, to that point, whether it's trauma, whether it's ASD, whether it's ADHD, the nervous system is impacted very similarly in all of these. So a lot of what you see in presentation is directly correlated to the nervous system. And so it shows up across the spectrum of all of these different situations. So we present often. When I first started doing this research and we read the book, we both were like, are we autistic? Is this happening? But then as we started to understand that's probably not it. Although I did have an ADHD diagnosis in second grade. I don't think that's true. I think that was trauma.
That was trauma.
So, but trauma shows up very similarly.
It does. And we do ask that question. I think we do a good job of saying, like, is it one or the other, or is it both?
That's right. Because they do exist.
Well, and that's something that, like, you know, when you're out there in the wild and someone says, like, I think so-and-so like has autism, like, one of our first questions really should be, is there also a trauma history?
That's right.
Because we want to know, because we should be treating both of them. And the good news is that if you were a clinician and you were listening to this, which I found very helpful, is that if it does end up being both, or maybe it wasn't trauma and maybe it was actually autism, the way we treat both of those is so similar that haven't hurt your client.
No, you haven't.
Thank goodness.
You haven't. And actually, and part of what I'm working on something that I'm writing right now, and part of that is that even if you come from a very stabilized family but weren't diagnosed, right?
Yeah.
Trauma can show up simply by the fact that you weren't diagnosed and you're trying to show up in this world. That can be the trauma origin. It's still traumatic. And trauma often happens to people who are neurodiverse because they're not reading social cues. They get taken advantage of. They have a hard time setting boundaries. They're trying to be accommodating. And so often they get taken advantage of. So often we see trauma show up in relationship to the neurodiversity.
Right, because maybe there's a high level of naivety. Like, that's a part of it.
That's right.
When I told you I was reading Grant, and I was like, I'd be willing to bet that if Ulysses S. Grant came into our office, that one of us would want to diagnose him with autism. And it was those first couple of chapters, if any of you have read that book, he's so socially, like, he doesn't get it. And he really does not understand why people are not just the way that he is, which is just being kind and thinking people are just doing their best all the time. Like, being like manipulative didn't make sense to him. He's like, but that doesn't make sense. Why do we do that? Well, I agree. However, that is the reality of the situation. It was a really interesting thing. Not that we can diagnose somebody that's been dead 100 years, but like, you know,
but we see the symptomology.
It's super interesting. That was an interesting like read for me, because I was reading that in conjunction with like the work that I do. And I was like, that is fascinating right there.
Well, I also wanted to address the fact that lots of people say, so talking about diagnoses, is that why is this being diagnosed more today than it's been diagnosed in the past? Right? So we hear that a lot, like, oh, everybody's on the spectrum now. Everybody's got a touch of autism, right? These are the types of things I hear. Well, there are three things that better diagnostics do not account for. And I call them the 3 A's: asthma, autoimmune, and autism. But they are directly related. And we do know that our immune system lives in our gut. Our gut health is directly related to messaging in the brain and our direct health. And so when you start to see that our food has had an impact on this, our world changing technology, we've seen more change in human evolution in a very short period of time than we've ever seen in human history. And that includes the Industrial Revolution.
Well, and the amount of information that we have access to.
Right.
Like, think about what my mom had access to and how much information I have access to.
Right.
Like if I have a question about anything, I have this little thing that's a pocket computer. It's a tiny pocket-sized computer.
We call it a phone, but it
that
isn't.
will tell me everything. Right. I can look up like all these questions that I just asked you. I could have looked it up and got 16 different answers. 4 of them would have been correct and the rest of them were wrong. But I could have gotten them.
Right.
But that actually, one of the things that they've talked about is how much slower our brains are. Just a neurotypical brain is developing because of that access to information. Well, what if you process information more slowly?
That's right.
What does that mean for you?
That's right.
Yeah.
And because of that, I think we are seeing that it's more predominant. But I do think that we're also changing for lots of reasons, environmentally as well as our food and things like that. But we know that if your gut is not well, your immune system is going to be down, right? We're seeing, air quality, all these different things. I mean, but those 3 A's are highly diagnosed comparatively to what they were in the past. And better diagnostics does not account for all of it, which means it has to be somewhat environmental.
There's an environmental change. Like how is that
environmental change, right? So there are things that are changing. And so some people's brains are going to adapt differently to that. And yet I would tell you that just like with any population, because you maybe are on the spectrum, highly intelligent, right? But does some certain population also have an intellectual disability? Sure. And autism? Absolutely.
Well, we've always had autism.
Right. That's right. And so you can have borderline, you can have bipolar disorder, you can have schizophrenia and autism. Like this is a processing. It's not the mental health piece. So you can have all of these comorbid. So some portion of it is your baseline high intelligence, which I think their intelligence is easier to access because they don't have so much social rhetoric running around in their brain.
Yeah, so, I honestly think there's a part that makes me like really love the idea that I could care a little less about what everybody thinks and is doing and all this other stuff. Like a lot of times that is just chatter if we think about it. Like what do you I don't know, what is the concrete information that you have right now? Can we just go with that for just a minute?
Right.
We can take into account all those other things, but I don't know, a little bit of slower processing on that part might not be a bad thing.
Yeah. And you know what we called these people earlier in life? We called them scientists. We called them mathematicians. We called them engineers. We called them quirky. We called them serious. We called them rigid. We called them these things. The truth was they were neurodivergent.
That's right.
And they have changed the world in ways that have been great, right? Yeah. So it's not about intelligence.
No.
It's about processing. So I want to bring that back around. This is not something to fix. It is something to understand, and that we all need to make accommodations and grow in our awareness to meet our fellow person where they are, right? I mean, that's really what we're talking about. So even if it is more diagnosed, all that means to me is we have better understanding that we have a natural variation in human development, which we've always known.
We've already known that that's true.
That's right.
Like there's no different, like, and there is a genetic link in neurodiversity.
That's right.
Yeah. Like if you have somebody that's neurodiverse in your family, you're more likely. So it is being passed down, just
that's
like brown hair and green eyes. Like that's no different either. And it's also doesn't mean that it's a deficit.
It is not. It does not have to be a deficit.
Right. What the deficit is a neurotypical world that doesn't want to accommodate.
That's right.
For everybody.
That's right.
We're all welcome here.
But now we do have companies who are particularly looking for people who are on the spectrum because there are some great strengths.
Yes.
Right? And so we just need to utilize all of our resources appropriately so everyone can live their best life.
Yeah, because nobody wants Melanie Peebles to be a mathematician. Absolutely not. That should not happen for anybody.
Right. Right. Yeah, that's right. So it's a big topic.
It is.
But it's really we just need to be more curious and understanding about each other's differences and see if we can't create a little more tolerance.
Yeah, go be curious.
Go be curious. That's right. All right. Thanks so much. We'll see you next month.
There's this, I forget what book it is. I think it's called it's called ADHD 2.0. And one of the things that it said about ADHD specifically is